welcome to this session of the Healing Solidarity Conference. I'm Mary-Ann Clements, the initiator of this conference, and also a writer and consultant and facilitator of the Replenishment Room. This conversation you're about to hear is with Fredrick or Ouko. So we've been friends and colleagues for a number of years, over 10 years, I think. And I recall first meeting Fred in Kenya, visiting a project he was involved in, which someone had told me about and suggested I go and see him. And I recall how inspired I was by his commitment to the work he was doing, by the kind of relationships and community networks he was building around work with young people at the time. And we've watched each other's careers over the last 10 years and continue to share on the journey. And in many ways, this conversation you're about to hear is kind of the culmination of conversations we've been having together for a long time about some of the things in our kind of international aid and development system, which don't necessarily always work for leaders in the South, which is what Fred is. You know, he's a leader of organizations in who comes from Kenya, and you'll hear more about him in a minute, but I think this conversation really is what this ongoing conversation between us is one of the things that inspired me to create this conversation, this conference. And so I hope you'll enjoy this conversation that we had together as part of it. So hi, and welcome to the Healing Solidarity Conference, and I'm here today with Fredrick Ouko, who is, I'm going to tell you all about him. He's currently a disability inclusion advisor for Light for the World. And previously he worked as a founding executive director for Action Network for the Disabled, which is a national disability organization in Kenya that works with young people. He's also founded a social enterprise called Riziki Source that connects persons with disabilities to job opportunities in Kenya. And in 2012, Fredrick was elected as an Ashoka Fellow and an Atlantic Fellow in 2017, based on his commitment to issues of employment of people with disabilities. He's got a BA in Political Science and Sociology from the University of Nairobi and a postgraduate certificate in Social Innovation Management from the Amani Institute in Nairobi. So welcome, Fred. We go back a few years in our knowing of each other as well. So that was the formal bio, right? So
thank you.
You're welcome. So it's good to be here and to be chatting with you. And I just wanted to ask you to say a bit more about your life and your work, really. When we first met, I think it was in the very early stages of Action Network for Disabled Youth, which is familiarly known as Andy, right? And you were just getting started, and I think that was probably about at least 10 years ago now, maybe a bit more, but just it'd be interesting for people to hear a little bit more about you, you know, beyond the bio, who you are and what you care about.
Hi everyone, as Mary-Ann said, my name is Fredrick Ouko and I'm a Kenyan, a person with a disability. I have a physical disability. I'm been interested in issues of young people with disability, but more from a perspective of how do we manage transition from school to employment. And so my work has really been around issues of employment for persons with disability, because I see there's a big need around how do we help individuals who have different types of disability get work. And that's so because people normally do not give the same opportunities for persons with disability, because they normally think that if someone has a disability, they don't deserve to work, they just need to be helped. So this is really at a personal level, something that I have committed to be doing, and all of my career is centered around issues of employment for persons with disability, including my current role, where I'm a disability inclusion advisor for Light for the World Netherlands. Mm-hmm. So it's to look at how do we get small businesses owned by persons with disability, young people, and women to get to scale. How do we provide business development support for them and brokering linkages to bigger companies so that they can get supplies, contract, and then they're able to grow as companies. So really, my interest, personal interest, is around issues of education for persons with disability as well as employment.
And my recollection from the beginning of working with you is that even before Andy started, you were already doing entrepreneurial things, right?
Yes. So I started my own businesses. At least two failed, and now also started Riziki, which is also essentially a social enterprise, but more of geared towards my passion as well, helping persons with disability connect with employers and helping employers understand disability issues, helping them to get individuals who are qualified in certain fields so that they can employ them and give them an opportunity as an interview, being kind of an intermediary, and training also persons with disability to be able to fit within the what you will call normal interview system. But now also more looking at what are other employment initiatives that we can create as a social enterprise to earn income, but as well supporting employment of persons with disabilities. So these are really kind of my interest, and I'm willing to risk and see how it goes.
Yeah, I know you've got a big commitment to that work, and I want to sort of take us into the theme of the conference a bit, but sort of bring that theme with us, because the conference is really about two things. One is about how do we heal the development sector, for want of better language, but what are the solutions to the problems that we see in the sector? And I know those are things that you've been interested in, we've both been interested in for a number of years. So we just want to talk a bit about those things. And then the other thing is kind of how do we think about healing ourselves in the sense of paying some attention to ourselves and what might be need to be shifted and transformed in us in order to have a more equitable approach to working in solidarity globally. So they're big questions, but we want to just dive into them a bit and dive into them with your experience as someone having worked in Kenya in development type activities, obviously bridging business and development, and I don't think there's always fine lines between those things anyway, right? But just dive into them and say, like, what are the big problems right now that you see? What are the things that really irritate you? What are the things you think we need to get better at, I guess?
I think from my perspective and working from the South and Kenya specific, I think we don't pay attention to personal care in terms of getting time off work and to just be yourself, rejuvenate, connect with your friends, connect with your passion and things that helps you to recover as an individual, as opposed to emotional connection to the work that you do, which is within development spheres. And what baffles me is the fact that normally, and some of the projects that people work on here are either funded by someone from the Global North, or development organization or foundation, or even if it's official development arrangement, while they know there's need to help people who are working in this highly charged emotional field to relax, they are not ready to resource that. Right. So it means that you are on your own, but as we can go and have a holiday, but for you, we want impact. We want to reach a particular milestone. It doesn't matter if it takes longer or if it takes a shorter time, but you have to ensure that we reach this. You can't have a holiday. And if you are carrying your work to that holiday, which means it's not a holiday actually. And again, it's not paid for. So looking at that disconnect and which is perpetuated by how development projects are structured with people who actually understand and they know that is a deficit, but they will do nothing about it so long as for them it favors them, because they can work for a bit, few hours, few months, go for a holiday. But while people, those working with them on the same project in the global South, actually having to put in more hours without rest and sometimes with low pay. So that really hits me because you would think it's a common sense thing as human beings to try and be in solidarity with one another that, yeah, there's time for working, there's time for resting. We are all working toward the same goal, but also as an individual, you won't perform to your maximum if you haven't gotten enough rest or if you're not resourced adequately to be able to not to worry about other personal needs. So kind of a disconnect there. And sometimes there's a fashion around for which people say, and there's a common term in development nowadays that we are not a donor, we are a partner. But actually then go to do exactly the opposite of a partner. Because a partner is, if you are in a partnership, it means you agree on particular things and you have a common understanding. And it means you work through a mutual understanding, conversation, discussion before you reach a decision. But then you say you are partners, but then you dictate what needs to happen. You don't even engage the people you say are your partners in terms of reaching particular decision, but you still want to claim your partner, and it's not a donor recipient kind of relationship. So I would think it's just better to say we are in a donor recipient relationship than saying that we are in a partner relationship within a development project. So really that's also something that I think we need to build solidarity around and just understand what is the language, how are we programming the mindset of people we're working with to understand for within this particular arrangement, you have these rights. This is how we'll organize ourselves in terms of arriving at decisions, that you can actually object to something that you think is not workable. And we don't have solutions coming from the north. It's that we want to see what's the best strategy perhaps to use so that we can arrive at particular milestone that we want to achieve together.
Yeah, and I think that it's something that's bothered me for a long time as well, like this sort of lip service to partnership that I think you're speaking to, like the idea that we can say, you know, it's a partnership and that's good enough. And actually it doesn't matter what that, you know, the context of what that partnership is actually like. As long as, you know, we say it's a partnership, then, you know, that's a fundable thing. And we don't tend to I'm just sticking my thing in. We don't tend to what's the word? We don't tend to kind of assess the quality of partnership very effectively at all, I think. And so yeah, I totally agree with you. And I wonder, like, from your perspective as someone who's been a partner organization to, I think, a number of different, you know, been running a partner organization to a number of different organizations, what are the things that feel like solidarity? Like, have you ever seen them? And if you have, like, I guess what you'd started to speak to them in a way. It's like, you've got to be able to say, no, that's not okay with me. There's got to be like capacity for you to say no, actually, and for it to be difficult, even in a way, you know, to not agree about everything. That's definitely one thing.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, of course, we fashion things around partnership, but we don't expect that there's going to be a challenge of ideas from who we consider to be a partner from the global south. We want them to be saying yes to everything. But for example, and we just had a very recent example with an organization here that asked the supposed partner of theirs that how about if in our project that we generate together, you are always budgeting for you traveling to come to Kenya, and it takes an X amount of money. How about if for one time we also get the leadership of this organization to travel to come to US or London or Paris, also to come and visit you and talk to supposed supporters, and just also have a feeling, or even arrange a training from your side. And it struck them that actually they didn't recognize that that's a need with the partner they are working with for years, that we need complementarity if we are calling something a partnership.
Yeah, it's not just you come and visit me.
Yes. And also, how are we building capacities of one another? Capacity building is never one way.
No.
There's something you can learn from me, and there's something I can learn from you, arranging for that. So for you, it's okay to Google something and then you say you're an expert on something. But for me, I can't teach you anything. I can't share with you anything. What I propose, you are always saying, no, this will be costly. But you forget, maybe one of your return air ticket is enough to pay for a training maybe a week. If we had decided you are not coming, but we hire a local maybe consultant who actually understand the environment. So there's kind of big disconnect, and people saying we are partners, but they actually don't mean it, because the moment you suggest something, they start seeing as if, so maybe there's been bad blood. So you've been bottling up these particular thoughts that now you are kind of saying them. Yet it's just an opportunity for people to reflect on what has been, what is the nature of working. Are we honest, or do we just want to hear what is best suiting our needs or our plans, as opposed to being kind of mindful of what the other person is feeling, and if they are truth, they speak truth to the power, that we also come and say, perhaps we apologize for what we didn't consider first. Maybe it wasn't our mistake, we just didn't know. And then begin to build from there, that, I think we acknowledge these and we can work together going forward. Then it means the other person will feel appreciated, and then you begin to build kind of a solidarity movement there, because people think you will start seeing you as somebody who's responding to their needs, to their feelings, and then the atmosphere becomes of kind of open, because they were able to suggest something to you, you listen, and you are adapting either your system or the way you've been used to working, that reflects what their wishes are and what they will want to see changing going forward.
And to me, I'm just going to kind of call a spade in the sense that I think that when people don't do that, there's an element of exploitation and an element of, or a kind of colonial mentality about development that doesn't do that, essentially, because there's an expectation that somehow partner organizations in the global south will just do what the northern partner suggests. To me, that's that's deeply problematic in those ways, that it is actually replicating the idea that somehow white people, not always white people, but often white people in the global north somehow know better. Right?
And there's even scenarios where you are sent an intern who's just still in university. Actually, they've come to intern at a partner organization. Now they're being sent to Africa, and they're ones acting as if they know everything more than senior staff who are already working there or with 10 years experience, and being kind of lectured.
Right.
So so it's the same mentality. Someone is still going through school, but they're coming to teach someone who left school 10 years ago. They've been in the field working, and they're saying as if they know what they're saying. And then when you find out, and sometimes it comes out as if when you read some of the, the way when someone goes abroad, they write their own blogs for which they don't give you the entries. But when you are online Googling, and then you find, okay, so this is what they said about us, that we were naive, we didn't know anything, but then they helped us to move from point A, while it's actually opposite. And they spend all their time moving from one coffee shop to another and going to this beach or the other. But in real sense, what they're writing back is that they were able to empower this particular partner, yet they made them, and is a trend that you make them work more for less.
Yeah.
Not at the same rate at which you work you work at maybe if it's from London or something. So you put different rates for the same work, or even more hours, but you pay low because you know perhaps you have a superiority of exchange rates and that. So it means for them, if you just give this small budget, it will be able to do this, but then we remain with the others. And then it's actually blatant thievery, but people don't want to call it that because you still within the same project that you had put up to help people. Yes, you still deliver what you wanted, but you have made people to work at less for your benefit.
Right, absolutely.
But this normally doesn't come up. An interesting
but
thing.
But it's going on all the time, right?
It is.
You both know that. Yeah.
I can tell you a week ago, there's a project that I was involved in my previous employment, and it was funded by EU. And EU called names and they said, no, you guys, because they had sent somebody to do evaluation, and they just said, we think you undervalued the work that was put in by your partners. You put a lot of money into you as an Ingo, into your human resource, but that was not the same reflected to your partner organization, while they did more. And they were told openly, and they were embarrassed because they were being told this information before, within the same room with their partners.
Yeah.
Yet they've been saying, you can't have this cost because EU doesn't allow. And then the same EU is asking, why didn't you consider putting this cost for your partner organization? Yet you took nearly 40% of the budget to your human resource, and the smaller version that was left, it's the only that you now allowed your partner to use. So there's actual things that are happening real time, but people never want to talk about them. And sometimes even partners are not willing to talk about them because maybe it's the only funding they have.
Right, absolutely.
So you risk cutting it, even if the terms are not conducive for you, but you say, anyway, let's stay in there while we're still looking for other resources to run our work. Otherwise, we'll be out of business.
Yeah. So there's two things in what you just said in the last few minutes that I wanted to just go back to. The first was the story of kind of people coming to volunteer or intern or whatever the words are, and right, I love that example of people writing blogs, and you of course these days can search for them. It's not like a letter home, it's like a public letter home on the internet, and see all the things they're saying about how helpful they're being. And I think that's a really interesting kind of dynamic of how we have this whole kind of exploitative system set up, that like people can say they're doing one thing and the reality can look very different on the ground, particularly to the people on the ground people in Kenya, for example, who are being supposedly worked with. And I think that's really interesting. And I think there's something about like the fact that we now have such sophisticated tools on the internet that might be able to disrupt some of that. But I think it's really interesting that it's starting to pop up, and I've seen things on social networks, of people sort of, claiming all kinds of good that they're doing, and parodies of it beginning to emerge as well. And I just wonder, like, do you think that like all internships and volunteer projects by kind of middle-class white people should be scrapped, or do you think there's like a way for that kind of activity to take place in a very different way?
I think it depends on the format. Like for real, what do you do with a 3-month internship with someone who's still in school?
Yeah.
Probably they're just coming to do their projects, but they're in conduit, but they're saying they're helping a particular organization. I actually know up to 3 people who've come in that way. And then later, after going back to school, they graduated and they came back and launched an organization of themselves. Because they came kind of to scout for a need, and then went back, talked to their friends, and started fundraising. And now they came back, but did not even work with the same organization they were saying they were helping for the 3 months they were there. So they kind of, it's self-interest driven. There are those that do a nice job for which after the 3 months they go back and they kind of still interconnected with the organization they came to volunteer with, and they're supporting. But there are those that come for their own selfish interest, and I don't think if a 3-month internship is sufficient to be able to say they help on something. They barely even know the country. They barely even are integrated within the system. They're already going back. 6 months, maybe they take 3 months to get to know, and then they start just working within 3 months, and then they're also supposed to go back. But they are those arrangements that maybe if someone came for a year, so you anticipate that at least maybe for 6 months they did something worthwhile or help to change an organization or help with a particular task, but not the very short-term visit, because that one is just familiarize themselves with an environment for which then maybe they complete their project, the university project, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, speaking as a person who quite a long time ago now did, kind of start in this sort of work in a kind of volunteer placement that I think on reflection probably had very little impact. Yeah. I worked in a school in Eastern Zimbabwe, more than 20 years ago. And I was aware at the time, and I don't know, there wasn't blogs, so you can't go find my blog about it, unfortunately. I was aware at the time that there might have been a few small, simple things that I did, maybe for individual people, and that beyond that, like, my impact was probably fairly negligible, that there was much more that I learned from living in and with that community than they were ever going to learn from me. But I don't know, and I don't think I've got the evidence going back. I don't know if I was really that vocal about that, because there's this expectation that you're sort of going somewhere to kind of help people, right? And so there's a whole systemic aspect to it, as well as the self-interest aspect. And for me, like, the self-interest in that was like, I want to go see somewhere else in the world. And, maybe we can accept that that's okay, but let's not then say, I'm changing the world because I'm like a white teenager, because it's not us.
It doesn't mean when you visit a slum and your colleagues back home haven't visited a slum, so you're changing the world.
Exactly.
A visit is okay. Knowing how other people live and their tradition, their cultures is okay, but let's not call it changing the world.
Absolutely.
Let's just say I was able to learn these ways, and maybe we made friendship with 3 or 4 people that I continue to be in conversation with. The 4 people maybe you can help. It depends on how the level of friendship, where it is, but you can't say then you help a whole community that I helped better. I changed all this. It is not possible.
No, absolutely. And I think, like, in terms of that sort of like volunteer placement type of stuff, I mean, you might say just, it's basically an old colonial idea and it should go. But I think if things like that are to exist in future, they should be much more about like building solidarity, by which I mean, like, more like maybe like an exchange visit. Like, I come visit you, I learn from you, Fred, you come visit me, and like maybe we're peers, so either we're students and we're all students, or like we're both directors of organizations, and we learn something from each other that's like useful in terms of kind of how we build connections that actually are useful for people.
Yeah, I think it's, the idea of coming here, going there and learning is, you actually build a more connected solidarity, because you always know that when you go to a particular town, you can visit so-and-so, and they will tell you, these are the good places to go to, and they'll have your back, essentially. But if you came and you didn't have a connection with an individual at a personal level, it's difficult to say you can have an organization as part of your kind of solidarity. It's the people within the organization that you connect with. It is those that will be able to take you out maybe for a dinner. You have more intimate conversation, so what people do here, what are kind of the cultures, and what are the things to look out for. That then when you go back, you have stories that are informed by people themselves. And then in retrospect, also they can have an opportunity to come and learn how things are done, and begin now to understand why is it that for our country, we are at this level for this long. What's different in London for example, just like the the road public system, the transport system, you will be just picking that, and you took someone into a tram or maybe the bus, how they organize, and they came back here, they will see how far we are and what actually needs to happen. And from that learning, even when they're talking to their representatives, they have some knowledge from what they learned through their friend back at home, and that they're able to connect, see their challenges, and be able to use that knowledge to begin to try and influence. But they didn't have an opportunity to come, or they just maybe looking at the CNN, or it will never happen that they know exactly how life is there, apart from you just telling them. But for you, you had an opportunity to come, you understand the challenges, and you already know how different we are and what makes maybe London tick more than Nairobi. How have you dealt with the issue of traffic as opposed to how it is in Nairobi here? So there is that connection and solidarity around how things are done and learning from at a personal level.
Yeah. There's something about it being more important to like understand each other than to sort of do things to each other, in the sense, I mean, do things to each other as in say that you're changing something or building someone's capacity or whatever, that those things seem like secondary to what we're talking about, really. Like the big thing is like building relationship, really. And I think for me, like that's what good partnership could be about. And I think it's pretty rare in my experience, but I wanted to go back to what you said about the money thing, because I think it's a really important point. Like, there are plenty of projects where the budget, in fact, most projects where the budget is top heavy, right? Like organizations, like paying organizations. And when you have that imposed on the development context, so you have like more money going to the organization and the people working in the organization, the global north, even if they're not actually really doing any of the work. There's a power imbalance that I think is pretty impossible to reconcile with anything like solidarity, right?
Yeah. I mean, and that's the most unseen form of inequality within development.
Financial, right?
Yeah, financial inequality. People don't want to talk about it, but it is there. And for example, somebody will tell you, you know what? It's expensive to live in London, so that's why we put these costs, and that's why it's high. But Nairobi is equally expensive to live in, but that they wouldn't say about that.
Yeah.
And then they will also tell you, by the way, for your cost, budget this in your currency.
Yeah.
Yet in their cost, they budget with the primary currency. Maybe it might be US dollar, euro, something like that.
Pounds, yeah.
And so it means even at the exchange rate, they're still retaining money for the organization, for which, for a partner organization in the global south, you'll be asked, if you remain with any shilling, what do you want to use it for? But for them, they will not be asked what they use it for. And the balance sheet is not shown to you when it's being sent to the donor. So there's a lot of discrepancies, but we always don't like to talk about it because it's not a fancy scenario to talk about it, but there's a huge imbalance in terms of adequate compensation for time spent, equal time spent on development projects together, and compensation for individuals who are working there. For example, you'll put in your budget, you'll put insurance, you'll put everything, you'll put inflation for per year, but for your partner, nothing like insurance, no inflation. You're working on the same project, funded by the same person, and then you say there's equality. There isn't any.
There isn't any, right? And it connects back to what you said at the beginning about resourcing rest and taking time out, because if you're being stretched by the budget, it's then very hard to like take time out and properly resource yourself, isn't it? And so what, like you said, that, that great irony of sort of other people taking great holidays and you can't afford them. it seems, you know, to be the sort of grossest example, really.
I mean, I can tell you, I don't remember the time I took an official holiday for the last 14 years where I worked in my previous employment. One, even if you went to rest just for 2 days, you are thinking, how am I going to pay my staff? This project is coming to an end next month. It was only a 1-year project. How do we get money to pay for even the rent where we are as an office, for people to be able to believe us, because we need a physical location. This project ends this month. You need to still write proposal. There's a deadline coming up. So you are always working. You find you carry your laptop home. You're still working up to midnight. You come to work. You're still continuing to work. There isn't any time for holiday. But if you had sufficient resources, it means you're able to get someone to continue doing your work, and you rest if it's 1 month or 2 weeks, just as anybody else. So, I mean, this year perhaps I'll have my first official
holiday.
Yes.
Brilliant. That's really good news.
Yeah, because it is just difficult for small organizations that are actually being run through development projects.
But often those small organizations are the ones that bigger organizations want to work with, because they see that they are having an impact on the ground, right?
Because they choose you because of your implementation, because of your track record in doing the right things. So they know if they have you, whichever small resources they give you, you will still achieve the same impact.
Yeah.
Which means they can still report the impact, so no one questions where all the money went. Because it reached impact.
So, Fred, I'm going to turn the table a little bit and say, what's the solution? Is there a solution? Do we give up this whole project of trying to make a difference?
We cannot. I think the solution lies into, of course, solidarity and understanding people's lives, and not trying to make decisions for them, and asking what will be the actual cost of this if I was, even myself, if I was to come and work from London or work from Nairobi, what will be the real cost, and what will you need to be able to deliver Impact B, and you still feel comfortable and happy about the work. You're not grumbling. Having those honest conversation and planning for them. So if it's budgeting, you're budgeting together, and asking if it's the partner, what will it take you need as a partner to be able to achieve this within this particular time. And they will always, they actually know the math. The problem is when they write, then it's got deleted when you are trying to balance the budget. But if you allow them to put the real cost, that is going to happen, and that's how we're going to solve that particular. Because then we'll be in their shoes and trying to feel, if I was myself, I'll also want to have a 1 week rest, and I want it to be resourced or something like that. And then you plan from that angle. I also believe we need to find a way of visiting one another practically and see what are the challenges they are going through, so that we are not left to researching them online and making assumptions that for this cost we can just do an xe.com and know the costs.
Yeah.
And xe.com will not tell you that there's other places you won't find receipts or things like those. So you need to be in conversation with people working on the ground. If it's Global South, visit them and maybe do a tour of where you plan to work to see for yourself. And when you're back in either headquarters and planning, you'll be able to know this, we actually need to get this because it takes longer to reach this area. Somebody needs a cab, and so we need to budget for that. And that would be the kind of solidarity, because there's someone who has come and they've visited, as opposed to just looking on a Kenyan map and Nairobi, this place, and there you say, oh, the same cost, it will be enough or something like that. I think, and the exchanges. So just really being interested in what are the lifestyles of these guys. Can we visit? Can they visit? So that everyone understands everyone's environment.
And then what it makes me wonder is why are the resources sort of centered on organizations in the global north. Like, what is it about the structure of our sector that needs to shift, you know? Because it feels to me like it doesn't make a lot of sense for the resource to be centered in places where the work isn't being done, basically.
So the problem has been around issues of trust.
Yeah.
So these people are very far. We can't know if they're doing what they promise they're doing. So we need an intermediary, and that's going to be a UK organization, a US organization working in Kenya as well, so that they are the one who then will ensure that our money don't get into so much risk or something like that. So if we can build trust, that also solves the problem, because you'll know if I give these guys this money, they will do what they promised and will still achieve the same results, as opposed to if we also send it through another intermediary organization. So trust has a lot to contribute on that.
Yeah, and there's this sort of tacit assumption that somehow if I give my money, you know, so I'm imagining donors make this assumption anyway, that if they give their money to an intermediary, that somehow the intermediary will be able to do something that they can't do, and will be able to manage the risk of that money and make sure that none of it goes missing. And that and there's also that, what I think is essentially a racist assumption, that they can't trust people in the countries where they want to work. So there's all these layers of problematic in that for me. Like, first of all, the not trusting people on the ground, and then also the assumption that the organizations that are intermediaries can in some way do something, you manage that risk. And I think a lot of the time it's just that they want to give that risk to someone else so that they don't have to bear it. But actually, that's a very costly and obstructive process a lot of the time.
Yeah, because it's costly, because the risks are still the same, whether with the intermediary or with the parent that is giving the money. Because if it's something going to happen, it's going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's just about how you look at it, and where do you want your money to go? Do you want your money to go into the process and get consumed a lot within the processes, as opposed to the real activity that you want to support? And so within intermediaries, so because the intermediary takes around maybe 30 to 40% of the same budget, while they've done nothing, and then they give it to the person who was supposed to do it, and the person gets less, yet they're supposed to achieve the same objectives.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a weird calculation there that doesn't make sense in terms of investment. If you are to look at it from a business perspective, it just doesn't make sense.
No, absolutely. I want to ask you one more thing before we finish, and it's about kind of being a disabled person and running an organization as you have done, and being located in the global south. Like, how does in your experience, does your disability intersect with the other challenges you're dealing with, and has your disability made it even harder to work in the sector, or do you think that the sector is kind of does it feel inclusive, or does it feel very uninclusive, like from your perspective?
Within the development circles, it's still while disability has been here for decades, but people still feel it's a new concept for them. Even for people maybe supporting human rights work, or they will tell you they don't support disability work. But then when you ask, then what are the rights you work on? They're like, oh, we don't have a specific program for disability. But then if you challenge them, if you're working on rights, human rights, then it means you also working on rights. So really, it's a conversation that is still ongoing. It's not easy, even as a disability organization raising funding. So it means you have to go through intermediaries, people who then take that risk, because people don't understand how to work with persons with disability. Supposedly, it forces you to go through an organization that then takes the money. They even also have no clue, but because they are trusted, so they're given the money now to give you, and then it is them to be reporting on even things they have no idea about. So, and this is going to take a bit of time for people to fully support disabled persons organization here in Kenya, because then they are claiming you don't have sufficient muscle to take up massive resources, and so we need to give you an intermediary so that you now begin to grow as then you are able to apply direct to be able to service those requirements of big funding or something like that. Yeah, so it's going to take time, but it's also like a really, really, really big challenge.
I always think that's an interesting one, the idea of like not you don't have sufficient muscle to take up resources. And I think obviously it's true that sometimes organizations are not at a stage where they can take certain amounts of money on, but I do think that sometimes it's kind of an excuse, because I think that organizations do grow, and they do sometimes grow exponentially, right? And so the idea that you can't take on more money to do the work that you really want to do, I think can sometimes be a bit of an excuse and a bit of a way out, Yeah,
it's an easy one, because then even how then do you grow if they don't give you direct?
Exactly.
Because you only form a history, a portfolio as you start, and through the circles that you continue receiving, that's how then you grow. So it's just like, so it's just this the purpose.
It's another way of kind of stacking the odds against you. And I think it would probably be true if we did a research that there are organizations in the global north that did get a leg up from somewhere, a significant increase in income from somewhere. At some point, someone decided to trust in them. But I do think, in my experience, that's much harder for organizations in the global south to persuade people to give them sufficient investment,
And I think it works for big organizations because then they are to go to if you want to get any resources now, because they know people with big money, they want to give it in big sizes.
Yeah.
So they will take it and then give at least 4 of you. So they still have, they still have a niche in the market.
Yeah.
So it means the smaller ones will continue being small, and the bigger ones will continue, because you are continually receiving big funding, and then the smaller ones are continually being served. So there's actually no room to grow.
Yeah, and that's one of the ways in which we, in the sector, I think, perpetuate the system in the world, really, that we're trying to fight against. We're theoretically trying to fight against. Sorry, I interrupted. What were you going to say? Sorry.
All right. Because then there's no room for growing there if someone is not trusting you with a little bit more, maybe 5% more, 10% more, 20% more, with you directly. Because even if they give you 10% more, but through another person, you are still not growing.
Yeah.
Because they say the risk is absorbed by somebody else. So you can't put it on yourself that this is how you can't demonstrate that this is how I have grown. But if they give you directly, then it means then you grow from there, and you can now put that as your kind of part of your history or position or something like that. Yeah.
So I'm just gonna ask you a sort of, hopefully a slightly more hopeful question, which is like, if you were to look forward 10 years, what would you like to see in terms of the sector, in terms of the work you do? Where do you see hope for things to be different?
For me now, I'm looking more at how are we going to invest in different ways of securing employment for persons with disability, and getting more organizations interested in this field, which means also availing resources for that. And there's an opportunity to do that. There's a psyche in people believing that employment is going to help persons with disability first at an individual level, and then at a communal level, and we begin to see themselves being independent, because that's what is the key, and beginning to participate within the national building processes. So, and there's a bigger push globally now towards both waged and self-employment for persons with disability, which is really hopeful for me. And I hope that also resources are going to be allocated for those that need it to be able to do those certain things. So not only having gatekeepers being given the money, but actually people who have the ideas being given the money to implement what it is that they think are the things that are going to solve the unemployment problem amongst persons with disability in the global south.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing really clearly from our conversation today is that resources need to move away from the global north and into the global south in more meaningful ways.
Absolutely, where they make the biggest impact. So let's resource those areas as opposed to where we only have operations. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Fred. It's great to have this conversation with you and to hear your thoughts about it. And yeah, we'll hope that some people hear us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to Marianne Clements and Fredrick Ouko, and this is the Healing Solidarity Conference. If you'd like to spend more time with the ideas and suggestions in this talk and in the others in the conference, don't forget you can make a contribution to support the production of this conference and get access to recordings and ongoing conversations about all of the themes and ideas we're sharing. Just click on the link below the video to find out more.